Hey, Nick, thanks for coming and hanging out with me today. I'm excited to talk the intersection of data and AI. How's it going?
Good, man. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a fun journey to get here, but definitely looking forward to geeking out with you a little bit.
Yeah, okay. So the first question I have to have is you're on the data tech side of the house more than just pure AI. Are you part of any data conversations, infrastructure conversations these days that don't involve AI?
It's always there, but it's funny. Like I reflect on my career, and I think we all know kind of the hockey stick like ramp up of AI discussions over the last few years, couple years especially. But we like to say, I mean, we've been doing AI related things for quite some time, right? Like we look at, I used to joke, we had an advanced analytics team, and they did a lot of regression analysis and kind of flirting with what could become, generative AI. But it really wasn't until we started to get into some of the computer vision based use cases that we started to say, okay, we've got some expertise here, early adopters of Alexa and then Siri-based conversations and things like that. But yes, certainly as it's become prolific in the enterprise, last couple of years, it's been quite a journey. But yeah, even though I'm a late adopter, I think in some of this, I still have to force myself every day to lean in a little bit and start to use these tools that are now at my fingertips. But certainly with customers, it's a discussion every single day.
Yeah, I mean, you call it a good point too, that it's AI isn't anything new. It's the latest types of models that are really driving this exponential curve that we're seeing today across, well, literally across everything, whether it's enterprise, personal use, what have you. And so when I think about kind of where we are today and where we might be heading, we've really gone from this place of AI requires either programming a tremendous amount of rules into a system and or having a lot of very well labeled curated data. And then we got these things that we call generative models, large language models, multimodal models, all the different varieties that we have today, whether it's text or images or video, that just all you got to do is share your thoughts and boom, something gets created. And the other power too that is happening is that this technology is recursive, so it's we're starting to see it train and accelerate the pace of learning, so it can get better on its own with less and less human intervention. And so the conversations that I'm in a lot today, we're way past the is this real, is this hype? It's like, where do I use this stuff? Where can I get real value? And the topic du jour is certainly agents. And it's incredible to think about how we were just talking about ChatGPT, and then all of a sudden, a bunch of different infrastructure and frameworks have now popped up that enable the creation of these things called agents, which is where you've got a large language model that can access other systems, other tools, other data sources in a very specific way to be able to get more actual work done as opposed to simple things like generating emails and so forth. And so we're very much in the application implementation phase right now. So I'd be curious from your perspective, what are some of the go-to places that you're seeing the most value in the enterprise right now? Use cases, industry specific stuff. What's coming up?
Yeah, I, just last week. So being more on the data side of things, I think that our stakeholders are being bombarded with marketing messaging around some of this, right? And one of my teams was meeting with a stakeholder on a data platform, and they were kind of exploring some of the marketing material that was being put out there. And I think my stakeholder had the right mindset. He basically said this: I can't have this be parlor tricks and science experiments. Right? It has to be something that's tied to business outcomes and has to be aligned to the overall AI strategy. And so I think regardless of the industry and use case, it really, right now the conversations are really around to reducing costs, growing revenue, managing risk, right? Those three things is kind of how I all bring it back to those types of activities. But it does have to start with these business outcomes. But if you then apply that mindset to different industries, I mean, I mentioned before computer vision, right? That's something where, in healthcare, where we had done quite a bit with, looking at EKG readouts and, identifying risk of stroke, which is fantastic. And then you take that fast forward today. I know one of our teams has been working on, an avatar-based AI that can, answer questions a little bit different than just a chatbot, right? You can actually have a video with empathy and have a voice, that's trained after the doctor's voice. So certainly healthcare, we're seeing, pharma a little bit, financial services for risk management. I think one that's like cross industry, which is fascinating to me, is around sales efficiency and prospecting, right? So one of those use cases where you can now take if you're a seller, you've got to go out and understand what is my addressable market, do research on every customer within that market, figure out what their pain points are. There's a lot of repeatable work that does take time, and so those types of things that you can go across industry with a use case like that. So lots and lots of, as you said, agent-based conversations, but also, it gets pretty complicated complex if we get into things like computer vision and how these different styles of AI can layer on top of each other.
Yeah, and I think that there's a couple things that you brought up. One is the always go back to the basics. Where can we create value? Is that at the revenue level? Is it at the cost savings level? Is it at the risk reduction level? I'll throw in another one in there that I'm having more and more conversations right now, and that is, what are the new things that we can do that create value? And sure, you could still tie those back to revenue generation, like you've got a new business line or whatever. But what's interesting there is companies are starting to ask more and more, is there data that we're sitting on top of that could be valuable now, either to us to leverage in new ways, or potentially as a new revenue stream, licensing stream that could be coming on board? Are there new business models that we should be thinking about? I think those are, for me personally, those are some of the really fun conversations to be a part of. But yeah, otherwise, the focus definitely goes to first, let's go and show and prove value on a lot of our operational type work streams internally. So you get sales, customer support. I mean, we've been trying to tackle that one for forever. And that's the one where I think finally people are starting to see, one, the user experience actually is better with generative AI at its core. And also it's more implementable than it ever has been. And what's interesting about that is some of those conversations, when I think about the things that come up around accuracy and privacy and performance, that I like to come back to when people's initial thought is, well, this thing didn't get it right every single time. I like to flip it around and say, well, do you know how often your people get it right?
Right.
And when I think about, I'll give you an example. This weekend, I needed to get in touch with one of my credit card companies, and they've got a chatbot on their website. And I was so disappointed when I found out it just said to me, give me 3 to 5 words to help get you started. And then the first message back was like, I can't help you with that. That's just not acceptable these days. Because, and then I got turned over to a human, of which this is the third time I've had this conversation. And every time I have this conversation, I get a different answer from people. And so if your excuse for not getting started is, well, the AI doesn't get it right and it's variable, well, at least it's going to be consistently variable in the ways that you've programmed it to be, as opposed to your people, which you just don't know. Now, there's some cases where this just isn't okay, right? If we're talking about medical diagnoses or insurance claims validation, yeah, you might want to slow down a little bit there. But that's where we really try to help companies come up with what I like to call their Goldilocks use case to get started, where it's not so small that if it's successful, you're not going to be able to get buy-in to scale it, but it's not so big that it feels aspirational that you'll just never be able to get there. Because really what you need is the blend between those two things of, this is the thing that's going to drive a tremendous amount of value, and here's how I get started, and this is the path that we're going to go on to be able to get there. That's where I'm seeing companies unlock really the most value.
Yeah, just lastly, you had your last week example. Mine was more on I used to be an engineer. I used to put hands on keyboard and code things, Python, SQL, lots of things. And now I don't do as much of that, but I've got to scratch that itch every once in a while. And I spend a lot of time in Excel, and I had written a very complicated formula at one point, but I'd lost it. And I went to chat and I said, hey, here's what I'm trying to accomplish. Can you help me do this? And so you mentioned like how often are people wrong? I got that formula wrong when I wrote it myself dozens of times before I got it right. Chat's first attempt to write that formula, it got it wrong, but it very confidently got it wrong. And I had asked it over and over to please double check it. I know it's not spitting out the right answer, until I had to be very crisp on where it was missing it. And then eventually it came back and said, yep, you're right. I'm really, really sorry I got this wrong. Here's an updated version of it. But, I have to remind myself as I experiment in my day-to-day that I've gotten that answer wrong too, right? And so I think it's an important lesson as we continue to experiment. But back on the Goldilocks, like how often are we, you've done a lot of these, but how often do we run into it's wrong because the data was wrong, right? Like it's not necessarily the prompting, or the design of the agent. It's the data that we fed the agent in order to make those decisions. I mean, I want to say we hit that a lot. What's been your experience?
I mean, this is one of my favorite and also most frustrating things about AI projects is because everybody wants to do AI right now. AI is the best way to surface all the other stuff you still need to take care of inside of your business. It's sort of like, I don't know, maybe a bad analogy, but you decide that you're going to go do a whole spring cleaning around your house, and just in going around the house trying to clean everything, you realize all the stuff that actually needs to get fixed, or is just piled up over time. And so, yeah, you get in and you're like, oh, this is a great AI use case. We want to go completely optimize how our sales team goes to market. Okay, great. Let's map this out, break this down. So we've got, lead generation, we've got qualification, we've got pipeline management. You're breaking down all these things. All right, how does the work get done today? Oh, well, this person does it a little bit differently than that person. And well, we don't really have a strategy here. There's no SOP over there. Okay, so we've got some process work to go dial in if you're looking for that consistency. Well, then what's next? Well, where's this data coming from? Okay, well, this person likes to keep track of it in a spreadsheet. Most people do use the CRM. Oh, okay, great. We've got some structured data. Oh, but our enablement data, it's in SharePoint, it's in this other tool and this other tool. And so before you even start an AI project, you realize that, oh, there's actually quite a bit of work to get done at the data layer to be able to scale this, and the process layer. We haven't even talked about the people layer, which we'll come back to, a little bit later. And so that's where we end up spending so much time. We, of course, try to find ways to be able to get started with where the data is and with what you have. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, I mean, this is your area of expertise. You've kind of been banging the drum on like, get your data in order to unlock all these opportunities. Are you seeing things start to shift in client conversations now where they're like, yeah, we're ready to go make that investment?
Yeah. To your point, though, I always coach our customers like, don't wait. Like, get started with something. Like, it's one of those never-ending stories. We could work forever and ever trying to clean and cleanse data, but I think we've all learned, even from our internal use, that if you're trying to roll out an MVP solution or an MVP agent, and your stakeholder is expecting, the data to be there on one particular thing that they're familiar with, and it's not there, it can really put up some stop signs on the project. So I think there's certainly some effort that has to be done to get a complete enough solution for that first rollout. But yeah, I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years on these data platforms, right? And we continue to still run into data silos and things that aren't integrated, but it's making it much easier to get the business case together, right? So like if AI is this like storm of known need that we have to put in place, and we've got people that are super passionate within the enterprise about data and data platforms and having solutions, AI is this like force multiplier where my stakeholders are now able to make the case. We can't go develop these game-changing solutions unless our data is in order, right? So it's really becoming part of that fear-based approval process of we can't do this without that. But I think I was telling you last week, Adam, that there's a part of this whole stack that I've never seen a lot of value in it, and it's not that I don't see value. I fear I fear the maintenance of it is these data dictionaries, right? So it's always been part of the stack, of the options that our customers can take. And what I mean by data dictionary is I've gone out and I've integrated a bunch of data from multiple source systems, and I've created a semantic layer within the data warehouse. And I may have pre-calculated some measures along the way, done some aggregates and roll-ups, but it still takes a data expert to understand in plain English what do those metrics represent and how are they calculated and what is the lineage. And usually in these big programs, we spend a lot of time to define those things, and then the change management as part of the rollout. The organization generally does not identify the ongoing data stewards to keep those things up to date. And so these tools that people are layering into these things become, aged, and there's some drift that occurs over time. And so therefore, I didn't see a lot of value in putting those out there for a tool that wouldn't be used. But now I'm starting to have these conversations around why that tool is valuable, because now we can take the AI agents and that becomes the input for them to be more effective into the future. And that was like just a big watershed moment for me to realize like how we can better design these platforms to better enable future solutions within AI.
Yeah, it makes me think about how a lot of unsexy things like data dictionaries, SOPs, all those types of things that we created for people to be able to use this stuff more effectively, but spoiler alert, they never actually go and use. Companies are going to be able to start getting value out of those things. And especially when you look at if you've got, let's say you're trying to go build an agent that's going to be able to pull some data from your data warehouse, lakehouse, wherever it's stored, right? They need instructions for how to go about getting that data, and they need to be able to translate the user query into something that makes sense. And so, if you define a term like, I don't know, pipeline differently from company to company, having a definition of that, where it lives, how it's calculated, how it gets formatted, and an agent just has to go check quite literally an instructions file to be able to go and find that information. Like, you already did the hard work, right? And we spend so much time on projects like making sure that we've got the right instructions in place, whether it's because it's trying to pull from data or just execute a task, that for the companies that have already made that investment is huge. The other area that I'm seeing a lot right now on our data transformation projects are where you do get to that point of, all right, we've done the migration, we've done the documentation, we've got it ready. Now we want to start rolling out these things for our end users to consume, whether it's in a data marketplace, or you've got data products, or just the true end user, not an analyst. Be able to help them consume that information faster by putting some AI tools in place so that people know, like, oh, if I need a new report, I can go make it on my own, maybe at this point in time, versus having to go ask an analyst, and then an analyst has to go spin up a report, and that report is fixed. And so being able to use the technology to unlock additional value that just like you'd have to brute force with human effort before, that's the stuff that I'm really excited about seeing to increase that ROI story on that data investment.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we're mitigating the risk of, shadow IT or shadow data solutions here, right? Like if the user experience is one in which I had to put in a request to have a new report built because I don't understand the data well enough to go build it on my own, now I'm able to confidently have that conversation with the agent, get the result back, and we're all confident that it used the data dictionary and the data is complete and the data quality is there and the lineage is there, that the solution is now valuable without a human being getting involved, right? But we still have those checks and balances. I think humans are still involved in that, and I'm sure we could come up with several use cases or examples in which we need to have both.
Yeah, I would say there's not a single system that we've implemented yet that's just full AI running on its own. And I think one thing that people really leave out as they're thinking about building these systems is there's crawl, walk, run approaches for pretty much everything. So the example that we were just talking about, where you want to enable completely user personalized self-service reporting, right? As a user, I want to be able to go in, describe the decision that I'm trying to make, the data that I think that I need, and have an AI go off and run it. So maybe the first version of that is that's a tool that your BI team uses, right? Instead of writing the SQL query and setting it up in Power BI or whatever, they use it, and so they do that first level of improvement. Then the next one is great. Let's turn over the request to the end user. So now, as a business person, I can make my request. I don't get my dashboard right away, but AI goes and generates it. The analyst goes and reviews it, makes sure it's accurate. So now you've got check two. Then it goes back to the user. Then you reach level 3, which is full autonomy. You're so confident in the system that it gets the report right 99% of the time, or whatever the quality threshold is, that you're off to the races. That's the approach that we like to take companies through. Of course, the vision is full self-service reporting, but that's the Goldilocks getting started is, and how you build your way to the proper level of governance, security, trust in that system.
Yeah, we're experimenting with all of those different crawl, walk, runs today, right? And so even outside of reporting, I know we have a project team that's working on data modeling within that lens, right? So how can if I've got a source system and I tell the agent that go out and study all these entities and relationships between entities, and here's the type of analytics that I want to do. We know that the first draft that's spit back in a data model, either logical or physical, isn't going to be exact. But it's a great accelerator for these teams to have something put on paper. I can't tell you how many data models I've built in 20 years that it becomes, writer's block at times, right? Like there's the addressable, source systems of what I have to understand relationships. You might have spent 2 or 3 days getting into designing something and then learned something new by interrogating a different set of the data that changes your whole approach, right? So having those types of tools early on where you still have the human being involved to say, okay, now I see the first draft. I've gotten past my writer's block. You've accounted for these things. I think we can apply it to different parts of the SDLC as well, not just report engineering.
Absolutely, yeah. You also bring up another, let's call it category or layer of agents that I don't think get talked about enough because they technically are kind of more behind the scenes. I would call them monitoring agents. So if you think about all the changes that are happening constantly, whether it's at the data level, at the process level, what have you, having agents that can monitor those processes intelligently. Once again, level 1 is notify me when something's changed. And I'm not talking about oh, you've coded out specific things for the agent to look through. That's not how these work. It's just give general instructions for the types of things to look for, let's say in a data pipeline or in the underlying data model itself, and then flag, hey, this thing changed or it looks like it's drifting. Now go take that to a human. So the human does something about it, triages it. You could put that learning back into the system. So then level 2 is let the agent make the recommendation itself, not just monitor and notify it. And then level 3 is it can start fixing and sort of self-healing some of these things on its own. And these are the pretty consistent 3-step process that you can take through a lot of these things where you ultimately can get to full autonomy, because the other thing that's happening is that the technology continues to improve and get better. So while level 3 might not be possible today, you can start putting in the groundwork to be able to get there so that in 6 months when Anthropic launches a new model that's better at doing this, you could swap your model out in your AI infrastructure and you're up to speed and you're able to go tackle that next level use case.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. And beyond the data platforms and kind of these, interjections of different experiments that we can do in order to get to level 3, I think the other part that we don't often talk about is the infrastructure layer as well, right? Is where, and I don't think, and I'm interested in your perspective, I don't think that AI, it's so far I haven't seen where it's brought any different type of approach, right? When I say infrastructure, I mean cloud. Because we've been talking within data workloads that cloud was the big change that happened in about 2012, 2013, when we started to get off of these monolithic MPPs that were out there, and I don't want to mention any brand names. Seeing when we see some of these that have emerged since then, that was our big step change in the data world. But what have you seen from cloud and infrastructure that's really changed the last few years and is enabling some of these things.
So on the cloud and infrastructure side, I think for me, what I pay more attention to is the AI infrastructure and how fast that's moved, because the ecosystem, you're the expert here, has been pretty mature from a data perspective, scaling. Like we've got gigantic applications with tons of data streaming constantly and running. So that is just so mature, even though I know it continues to grow and change and evolve, right? But on the infrastructure side, for AI in particular, that's where it's been impressive, but maybe not surprising in hindsight, how fast the hyperscalers, the Googles, the Anthropics, or sorry, the AWSs, the Microsofts of the world have really implemented this stuff inside of their platform. And it seems like there's a good, let's call it 3 to 6 month lag, which is pretty fast. So what I mean by that is new breakthrough comes out in, let's say, the open source world, or research comes out of a new approach. So early on, it was like, how do we handle evals or evaluations for these agents? Meaning, how do you tell if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing? So originally, it was LangChain was one of the ones that you could go and use. They're obviously not a big cloud platform, but very quickly AWS followed. Then Microsoft had some of their own stuff, and GCP has some of their own stuff. And so seeing how fast these guys can roll out that stuff, that tooling that could sit on top of where a lot of these things already live. I think the other vector that we're hearing more and more are players like the Snowflakes, the Databricks of the world that still sit on top of that infrastructure. They're able to move even faster in terms of the tooling that they're rolling out to be able to support a lot of these AI workflows. And the benefit at the end of the day to the clients or to the customer is that you don't necessarily have to go have this hodgepodge of AI infrastructure, which is kind of what it was looking like in the first 2-ish years of Gen AI in particular. If you wanted to go implement this stuff, or you want to move first and fast, you've got to go be comfortable using open source things or early stage startup things that come out. Otherwise, you just need to wait. And I think for a lot of enterprises, the wait and see from that level probably makes the most sense, just because long term, having a fragmented AI ecosystem doesn't work. But man, this thing has really evolved in terms of tooling in one place, that I think makes enterprises makes it a lot easier to adopt this stuff.
So like when we started our cloud journeys, 10, 12 years ago and learning this space, sometimes the value prop was, lean into the managed services because they're going to make your lives easier as far as, build and deploy and run. But now the messaging there and this is outside of AI, would be avoid lock-in, right? So, you're going to design for portability in mind. So, we went from, microservices that are designed and built in a managed service into more container-based workloads and things like that. That I can now take that container and go deploy it on any cloud. What are you seeing? Are we having those same types of discussions, with an AI lens, right? Are our customers starting to get concerned on a lock-in on a particular tool, or are they more adopting, and I think of something like an Amazon Bedrock, right? That's more of that API layer that I can design and build my apps that can integrate with an API, and I can just change out the modeling and what I'm tooling behind the scenes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, the fear of lock-in has not gone away, right? That's what everybody comes back to. It's like, oh, am I going to be tied to this platform? Because I think that has been it's kind of what ends up happening is whatever you commit to, whether we're talking big platform, AWS, or system of record platform like a Salesforce, well, I don't want to be locked in. And what's the real thing that's driving that question? It's the fear that something better comes out somewhere else, and I want to be able to go take advantage of it. And so the thing that I'm paying attention to right now the most is that's still the conversation. For a while, it was like model. Do I have to choose one model? No, you actually need to choose all of the models, so that you can find the best one for your use case. Because I think Claude is still one of the best for coding. You've got GPT-5 that just came out that I think people are figuring out what it's going to be really, really good at. You've got some Grok. But anyways, the point is that you've got open source. So you have all these different choices at the model level. Now, it's great. Like, you can swap models in and out because they're as simple as API calls. So that's fantastic. Then you get into or am I going to get locked into an agent framework that I have to go with? And that quickly became like, no, you don't have to. And so I'm seeing a lot more. It seems like the big cloud platforms are basically acknowledging that what we need to focus on is interoperability and orchestration as opposed to just doing one thing. And so what that tells me is that, as an example, you've got Google's agent to agent framework. Google said, whether you're building your agents on GCP or somewhere else, you're going to need your Salesforce agent to talk to your ServiceNow agent to talk to your cloud agent. And we're going to introduce a framework that's going to enable that to happen. And so I think the community in general has seen that, one, people don't want to be locked in. And two, that's what we need to focus on. And that's really what's developing in terms of this ecosystem, which I think is exciting. So you don't necessarily have to feel locked into a particular vendor. From a data perspective, I think that's maybe where it gets a little bit different, but I'm also hopeful in that it kind of doesn't matter where your data lives. I'm starting to see that more and more. Just as an example, I was playing around this weekend with Claude Code, which I can very easily basically spin up my own agents using natural language. So, hey, I want an agent that goes and scans my LinkedIn feed and pulls in the most recent news. And I want another one that, generates summaries for me. And I want another one that goes and analyzes, X, Y, and Z. With just a couple prompts, I can get these things spun up. I can use these other things called MCPs to be able to connect up to those data sources. And all those can live in different systems. And it doesn't matter. For that particular use case. Now, if you're going to go try to scale that through an organization, of course, you're going to be talking about where does that data live? Where does it flow? How is it secured? So those things do come up. But the early days, I'm seeing that there actually is going to be, I think there's going to be a lot of flexibility in this stuff.
Yeah, it's almost like cloud has to be the AI it's infrastructure. It's not just infrastructure, but it has to be seen as the AI delivery platform, right? We have to be agnostic to your point on, some of these things, and as we roll them out to the enterprise, how much are we seeing? Let me rephrase that. Like, we've been doing a lot of work on financial services, which we know has been a little bit lagging when it comes to migrations to the cloud. And some of that, right, like they're doing new innovation there, but some of these, core banking applications and credit decisioning systems and these things that are heavily dependent on legacy mainframe, there's been some reluctance there, right? So have you noticed when we've been having these AI conversations that these have been the use cases that might accelerate some of those things to the cloud, or are we just finding workarounds to do the connectivity into on-prem things?
I like this question a lot. I think both of those ecosystems are going to be pretty well developed. I would say that for where we're at right now, it definitely pushes you to say, gosh, there's so much tooling that's available in the cloud. If I've been dragging my feet and now AI is giving me FOMO, I got to go make this happen. At the same time, I think long term, the answer is that a lot of these AI workloads do end up running locally. And what I mean by that is either you've got locally in your cloud, right? So like within your organization, though, as opposed to having to go external and call a model and you're worried about data privacy and governance and things like that, which I think is kind of blown out of proportion right now. That's a different conversation. Then you've got I think eventually this stuff runs on device. And that's my hunch, just like projection for, I hope Apple is making that bet. And that's why they've been a little bit quiet and behind in this AI race, is because they're just like, listen, if you're going to do personal AI, it's got to live on this device. Same thing with being able to run models. Same thing with being able to run models on my laptop, right? If I'm a large organization and I know that I can install a couple models on my team's laptops, and that's what they're going to use to run these workflows because one, it's faster, two, it's the most secure possible thing ever, and three, I can govern the heck out of it. I think we get there. So then the question becomes, well, does that go to the mainframe level? And then does that mean that companies can keep everything on the mainframe? I actually don't think that that's an AI question. I think it's just an accessibility question, is that you still need to be able to get stuff off of that if you want your business to be able to take advantage of it. And I think that's the thing I'd throw back to you is what do you think is going to happen there, right? Because cloud to me was the ability to make that data more accessible across an organization so you can run workflows and therefore unlock value on top of it. So if you're storing it on a mainframe, is it really just for storage purposes? Is it a security thing? I don't know.
I think in that space, and that's a whole nother webinar, but I think in that space, there's a lot of reluctance to start unpacking 50 years of COBOL code, right? And so
just run it through AI. It'll just redo
Yeah.
everything, right?
That's right. That's right. But it does bring up also to your point of what is Apple doing, and and I think back 10 years ago when we were working with a robotics company who was doing some, I call it machine learning at the edge, right? So if you've got a consumer grade, robotic vacuum that's in your home that's trying to do, without LiDAR, is trying to do image recognition and sensor data without sending these massive payloads back to the cloud to process. There's only so much processing power and memory and hard drive space that you have at the edge, right? So back then the challenge was, how do I recognize that this is a chair or this is a table based off of the picture that I just took? And do I have the right model small enough that's trained that I can make that decision at the edge? And I think that's in my world where the innovation has really happened on the tech side as well, is taking these types of things and making them smaller, right? And so that the decisioning can happen at the edge without so much coming back to the cloud. You obviously want then result back to the cloud and what decision was made, but I think there's still some work that needs to be done on the latency and the size of these types of solutions for it to be really prolific at the edge. And so to your point, I hope that's what Apple's working on.
Yeah, there's plenty of people who are working on it. I hope for Apple's future sake, as a big, longtime Apple fanboy, they make some good bets here. But I think that you hit on a really good point there, and it's almost like the decision then becomes where you need maybe maximum privacy and security, minimum latency, and high real-time decisioning. That's the stuff that you're pushing out to the edge, which probably isn't anything new, by the way, right? But that's where it needs to go to the edge, versus the stuff that you can keep more centralized or even outside of your cloud is the stuff where you've got more leeway in those things. And so you get into some like really high risk type use cases there, which if we're talking Gen AI, I just don't think we're there yet anyway. So maybe you can delay that conversation if you're thinking about this.
Yeah, and it goes into other industries too, right? I just think through, for 20 years, we've been doing different types of modeling on predictive maintenance, specifically like IoT-based things, drill wells. There was one project we had around box cars and maintenance required on like train cars, just by doing image recognition. Those are things, if you think about the use case of oil and gas, where I've got, a rig that's out in the middle of West Texas with maybe, if I'm lucky nowadays, I've got Starlink that I can do that connectivity to get the sensor data off those wells, right? And we're talking about rolling out 18-wheeler sized data centers out to the edge in order to do that processing power. So I think the cloud is certainly a part of core enterprise, but there will always be use cases and spot solutions that we have to continue to solve for at the edge.
Yeah, sounds like a fun company to go start. Semi-trailer data centers that you can just move around where you need them.
That's right. That's right. Adam, can we get more back? We brought it up before, but more of the kind of human AI collaboration side of things and kind of the operating model of the future. And as we were talking, it struck me, and I keep thinking back into my history with this, right? And me flirting with and pretending that I'm an AI expert, throughout my career. But it does take me back about 10 years ago. I was in the Bay Area at a user group meeting, and they had a speaker there that was, he was chief AI officer of a company called Stitch Fix, which Stitch Fix does curated boxes of, stuff you wear, right? And so I think there's 5 or 6 players in this space, but you go in, you fill out a profile. Here's all of my sizes. Here's the types of things that I want to wear. And then their whole thing was, we have AI agents or AI that will take all of this profile information and curate the shopping list for a personal stylist that will then complete your box, and then your box gets shipped to you. It's 10 years ago, it was, I think some of these things started to gain popularity, but what made Stitch Fix unique at the time was they integrated in this personal stylist and the AI together. Well, it was fun to hear this guy talk because he said, as the chief AI guy, he was very, very confident in the algorithms and the machine learning that they had. And he wanted to run an experiment where he said, give me 10 customers and I'm going to run my algorithms and models against these 10 customers for the next box. And we're going to pull the human out of the conversation. And we're going to ship out a box filled with only with what the AI recommended. 9 out of the 10 boxes got returned. And so I think for me, it's always stuck with me that I don't know if we'll ever fully be able to replicate, that full stack, agents, creating agents that can do all of these things. And so it's always stuck with me last 10 years that the human is always part of this equation. And I'm wondering how much of that, you're seeing, how much reluctance are we seeing on the human AI collaboration, or how much excitement are we seeing?
Yeah, wow, it's a good use case. I know Stitch Fix have been a customer, my wife as well. But this is probably my favorite area to think about right now is this human AI blend, and also, you talked about pretending to be an AI expert, or however you framed it. If you check LinkedIn, everybody at this point in time is an AI expert. So I think we've all reached AI expertise at this point in time. Kidding, but in all seriousness, one thing to call out there is that those were predictive ML models, right? And those are they ultimately at the end of the day are very rule based. They are predicting, not unlike large language models, just in a very different way. And so this is one of those where we'll talk about human AI collaboration, but the real answer to this problem probably is a combination of ML that says, well, this is what the data suggests, and then an actual agent that then can look at that data, compare it with human preferences and say, oh, yeah, this is fair, but based on Nick is actually going to like this. Then the question becomes, how do you weave that back into the model? And so from a development perspective, this is where humans come in to make these systems better, is that human reinforced learning where they can do that curation. But really the thing that I'm looking at more and more is the trends around how does AI augment people and how does AI augment organizations? And at the individual level, you start to see what happens when you realize that 20%, 30%, 40% of what you do, you could just offload to ChatGPT today. And so instead of you writing the first draft of whatever it is, a SQL query or a blog post, AI is going to get you 80% there. So at the very least, your volume of production is going to go up, which, by the way, people talk about time savings. Nobody's really saving any time at this point. They're just doing more work per unit of time is kind of what's happening. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes that's not good. It's like, well, do I need to do any more of this work? So that's where the first thing comes in is I just replicate what I'm doing today. I give it to AI. Great. But the real magic is what happens when you start to partner with AI, so that now it's a strategic brainstorming partner. It's a planner. It's maybe starting to help you with decision making. It's going off and doing some deep research and bringing stuff back to you. So instead of me having to go spend 3 days plus an analyst to go research trends in an industry, I can go ask Gemini deep research to go do it for me in 7 minutes, and I've got something that probably was going to be better anyways. Then I could spend my time poking holes, asking more follow-ups, things like that. The other part of the human piece that I think about is what then happens at a mental level when these things start to go on, where more of your work is being done by technology than ever before, when our identities for the large part are kind of wrapped up in our work and our jobs. What does that mean for us, right? Like, how does my role start to evolve? Do I do more people's jobs? Which then you get into the conversation around how does AI augment entire teams? And I think the biggest mistake that I see companies making today is that they just take their current process, let's say it's 10 steps, and they say, great, we're going to have AI do 6 of the 10 steps now. It's missing the boat, because really what you have an opportunity to do is say, what's the end goal? And is there a better end-to-end way that I can get there now that's now been enabled by these technologies? And so that's a really fun intersection that I think that we have going on right now between AI and one thing that we're really, really great at Elixir, which is developing operating models for teams and departments and functions, is now saying, all right, well, let's assume that some of this is going to be done by AI. How does that shift how an organization gets shaped, how it operates, how it moves forward? And I think those are probably some of the most important conversations to be having.
Yeah, it goes back to the outcomes. Like start with the outcome, and now we have an opportunity for a process redesign, right? Not one that's influenced by what was done in the past, one where I have learnings of what's done in the past, but certainly the ability to really approach it from a fresh lens, right? And so if you like going back to Stitch Fix, right? It's like the outcome was I need a happy customer who's happy with their box, that I don't have to pay shipping on getting that thing back, returned back, right? And so I think what they realize, it'd be interesting to talk to them now to see like how has the last couple of years changed their processes. But at least 10, 12 years ago, right, it was one where the human being was still a necessary part of that step to look at their social media profile and see what type of style that they represented, things that you couldn't train the model on at the time. But it would be interesting to see like what are they doing today. But also, I think within that, and I'm providing kind of a consumer-facing solution there, but more so you mentioned op models of enterprises. And what are some of like the biggest fears, or at least what people are vocalizing when we're talking about these things? What are we hearing when we're saying, hey, we're going to redesign this process and your job is going to change in the future? Like, how are people reacting to that? Is it 50-50? Some are excited, some are fearful. Like, tell me more.
Let's do a little exercise. If I came to you today, Nick, and I said, hey, Nick, I'm better than you at your job. I'm going to do it. We're going to do your job differently. What's your initial reaction going to be?
Yeah, I'm going to say, bugger off, man. Like, I'm not going to be happy with that, right?
Probably not in those words, probably a little bit more aggressively. But I think that it's the same thing, right? Anytime you've got something that you feel like you're good at, that you're attached to, that you like to do, and somebody comes in and says, I've got a better way to do it. It's like, here's the best analogy. We're two guys talking right now. I don't know if this ever has happened to you, but have you ever attempted to problem solve something for your wife without being invited to do it?
Yeah, wouldn't recommend it.
Exactly, right? It doesn't always go so great. Rarely does it go great, actually. And the same thing happens here, right? You come into a group of people who, let's assume that you haven't co-designed this new state with them, which is a key thing to go and do, is design it with the people that it's going to impact, because then they get to drive it, right? They feel ownership for it. They get to move it forward, as opposed to coming in and saying like, here's the new process. AI is going to do 80% of this. You're going to do this 20%. We didn't validate this with you at all. Deal with it. You just create so much more mental overhead, because what's happening underneath all of that, and our Insignium colleagues know this better than anybody else, is that you're just triggering all the deep-seated fears that people have inside of them about, belonging and value and those types of things. Like, it brings all this stuff to the forefront. It just shows up as AI is not smart enough. It's not accurate enough. It's not fast enough. You start seeing all these things pop up. You're like, wait a second, didn't we just validate that actually it is? And now you're telling me that it's not. And so there's just some really simple things that you could do when you're designing these programs to get out ahead of this, so that these things don't happen and you can actually see the value, and your people can feel good about it along the way. Now, don't get me wrong. I want to just call out that some companies are actually going in using AI to completely replace specific roles. And not that there's ever a right way to go about doing that, but like, it is going to happen. The question is are those people, can you still use those people and leverage those people to be valuable inside the organization? My thought is yes. Mm-hmm. They're there. They've got so much domain, so much industry, so much company knowledge. Like, teach them to go do some higher value things, as opposed to just being like, oh, well, hey, we don't need you anymore.
Yeah, it's like AI, like, to me, the conversation isn't about replacing talent. It's about, that's not the message. It's about augmenting the talent with a digital teammate, right? Like, it's like, how can I help you do this better? But I just read an article about some CEO of some software company, that in like 2023, he was getting so much pushback on the teams adopting AI in some way to help with their jobs. He ended up getting rid of like 80% of them, right? And it's like those are the headlines that make that make the media, and I think it misrepresents like what we're all trying to do here, right? It's really about being more productive, and it's not about replacing, right? Replacing anybody's job. It's about retooling and doing things in a better way.
And I think that that's a philosophical, cultural choice at the organization level at the end of the day is, yeah, if you're in a PE firm, which are known for relentless pursuit of cost optimization, then don't shy away from it. Just call it what it is. Say we're going to go try to do this thing 30% more efficiently by having less people work on it. Don't sugarcoat it, right? But I do think that the bigger opportunity here, the one that I'm the most excited about, is the potential that it unlocks for us as people. I think about the stuff that I can do today that would have taken me hours, years to go and figure out. Like the fact that I can build a prototype of an application in a couple of minutes, the fact that I can take a picture of my refrigerator and tell ChatGPT to act like a Michelin star chef and make me a recipe with whatever I've got in front of me. You know me, I like to go make music. I've always wanted to make music, never was a musician, but now I can go talk to an AI and make some silly songs at least, right? Like that's the type of stuff that I think is really exciting, and it's going to change the way that organizations operate. It's going to change the way that the world operates, I think. And it's really exciting to think about unlocking more, not even productivity, just potential that are tied up in people.
Yeah, and I think about if I'm an engineer, I'm a data engineer, or I'm a mobile engineer, and I've got Adam now who's out there pretending that he can do what I can do. I think it's about how you bring that back to that engineer, right? So if you've gone and you've created a prototype, using, vibe coding or whatever solution that you want to use, it's not about getting back in front of the engineer and saying, I've done your job for you. It's about saying, here's my intent of what I would like created. And it just adds more fidelity to what it is that you wanted to create, and allows that engineer to get to a starting point without having to answer. A lot of times we run into with engineers, it's like you didn't fully document all of your requirements. Well, now you can turn them over something that says, well, here's everything that I need. Can you make it better and scalable and make it enterprise ready?
Yeah.
Right, so I think
the best example of that I've seen is the head senior engineer from Google came out and said, we've gone from a write first culture to a create first culture.
Mm-hmm.
And they have
Love
fully
that.
embraced this. It's like, yeah, eventually have a spec just so we can like check the boxes, right? But at the end of the day, you and I can both look at something, walk through it together and be like, this is what we want to go build. Now go build like the actual version of it with your expertise as an engineer. You just unlocked a tremendous productivity boost, and both sides probably are going to have more fun and enjoy working on that project together. I can think of how many times engineers have come back to me and said like, well, we built what you wanted. And I was like, well, no, that wasn't actually what I wanted, So not having to have those conversations anymore. But I think with that, let's get this thing wrapped up. Any parting thoughts you want to leave for the group?
I think we've covered a lot of like where it is today, what we're seeing in the market, how enterprises can unlock, real value. I think if there's like one thing, it's AI is not about like chasing these shiny tools. It's about chasing the outcome, and that outcome has to be powered by the right data, by the right infrastructure, the right operating model, like all of these topics that we've surfaced, right? It's super important that we look at it. I just keep going back to the working backwards from the outcome, right? And so I think that we have to like start looking at packaging these things into frameworks, right? And checklists and things to, maybe it's just tips and tricks, because I just keep seeing that we're going to run into, stop signs and we're going to get left behind if we don't start thinking about these things in a different way.
Yeah. And I think if I was going to summarize maybe some of the key things we talked about the importance of finding that Goldilocks use case that's like small enough that it provides value, but still big enough that it directionally has an impact on that higher level metric that you're going after. 2, there's no more waiting to fix your data foundation. It's going to be an ongoing thing. If you're already on the journey, go faster. If you haven't started, get started. You hit on operating model. right? How's this going to impact our people? How's this going to impact our teams in general? That shift from automation to augmentation when it comes to people working collaboratively with AI. And I think the last piece that for me is the most important, don't wait for perfection. Like, this is a developing space. It changes more so than any other technology we've ever seen before. You have to get started by experimenting and learning and being comfortable with the fact that you're going to be changing and iterating as you go, which, by the way, is how startups work and why they're so successful, is because they can adapt so quickly. And this is the technology of adaptation, and leaning into that and accepting that this test and learn is the path forward to finding and unlocking the most value, you'll cruise ahead your peers without doubt.
It's like the best time to get started was yesterday, but the second best time is today, right? So like, I think we just start doing something. But I'm also curious, just to close us out, like if the viewers of this, did any of this resonate? And what are your AI priorities? What are you seeing in your industry? I'm really curious. So if you can comment or get in touch and let us know what you're seeing, or if any of this discussion helped you, we'd love to hear that too.
Yeah, and if you need help answering that question of where to get started, Nick and I would be more than happy to chat. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time.